Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Review Desk. I am your host, Paul Vanderbilt, and today we're going to be discussing a film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. One of the later entries in the established Phase 4. This film has received mixed reviews, and we will be talking to our panelist, Desmond, to discuss this matter. Desmond, how are you doing today?
Good as usual, Paul. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, of course. Now, Desmond, we're going to get straight to the gist of it. The Eternals. Now, in terms of financial returns and critical response, the Marvel Universe, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, has been top of the line, the bee's knees, if you will. And the reception to the Eternals has been not as highly rated. Would you like to describe this phenomenon? What did you think of the movie?
The Eternals, I can understand the lukewarm reception, to say it mildly. The thing about the Eternals is it felt unbalanced. There were a lot of differences from the comic books that I couldn't really find a reason for. For instance, the romance between Sersi and Ikaris. In the comics, these two have always been a bit of a bickering. They've always been bickering a bit because of the fundamental differences between them.
What would these differences entail?
Well, Cersei is very much a party girl. You know, she enjoys life. She enjoys all the good things about life, good food, good company. And Ikaris is the heroic, stoic, all work and no play type of guy. There's even a comic book where Cersei sticks a note on his back that says, "I have no sense of humor." So to see their characterizations kind of changed in the movie, it was a bit of a surprise that these two would end up together. And personally, I didn't really see a justification for it, so I don't particularly know why they went that way with the script.
Is that the biggest change that was made to these characters?
No, one of the biggest changes is that they seem to have character-specific abilities, which was quite strange because in the comic books it's been stated that each Eternal has the same abilities. There are Eternals who focused on developing certain abilities over others. For instance, Ikaris developed his physical strength and his disintegrator beams, that sort of heat vision that he has in the movie. And it was said that he's the strongest of them, even though in the comics Gilgamesh developed his strength to be superior to Ikaris. So it was kind of weird. I think Sprite asked the question, why would Arishem make me this way? And it does pose a good question. Like, if you're going to build a planetary defense system, why wouldn't you make every single Eternal as strong as they could possibly be?
Now, it's been said of many characters and many properties, like I remember when Guardians of the Galaxies was announced, many people said they don't know these characters. Is it possibly not such a good idea to develop them into what would become a immersive franchise? What did you think? Do you think the Eternals were a viable property to select for converting to film?
Well, the problem with the Eternals, in terms of the comic books, is they've always been kind of boring. It's the same as with the Inhumans, although the Inhumans are a bit more fascinating than the Eternals, I'll admit, but they just don't have that much appeal. I'm sure there are comic book fans who absolutely love these properties, but for me, the Eternals, there have been some highlights, but overall I found them to be a little boring.
Were you concerned when the film went into production?
I was not particularly concerned because The same thing could be said about the Avengers. If you were reading comic books in the late 80s and early 90s, anything without an X or a spider on its cover was considered boring, you know? The Avengers being heroes with authority and initially working for shield with rules and protocols to them, and you can see this bothering characters like Captain America in the arc where he stops being Captain America because he's like, I'm not going to subject myself to what the government thinks I should be doing. I'm here for the ideology of America, not for people in power. So in that sense, the Avengers have always been a bit restricted compared to the X-Men, who could just hop on a plane and go kick some butt, or trash somebody's office or investigate. There was a bit more edginess to it. So the fact that the Avengers as a film franchise became massively successful and was also, let's be honest, very fun to watch, this could be used as an indicator to say, okay, maybe if they take unknown properties, they might become something viable.
Much like the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Much like the Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy, when it was first announced, a lot of comic book fans even didn't know about them. And it has become one of the most beloved franchises in the MCU. So when Marvel said, we're going to make Eternals and we're going to go all Kirby, yes, I was expecting them to really give us a good TV show, a good film. But unfortunately, I feel it fell kind of short.
Now, has this in any way dissuaded you from remaining true to the MCU?
No, not at all. I'm staying an MCU fan because a lot of people are saying this is kind of a sign that it's deteriorating. These are signals of the end of the MCU. I respectfully disagree. I have said it before. This is phase 4. This is the same as phase 1 was. It was an introductory phase where they're going to spend more time introducing us to characters rather than tell us the best stories that they possibly can, because the best stories that they've told us across the MCU are stories that were built upon that same introduction. When Captain America is defiant in The Winter Soldier, we know what he went through in World War II. We know the earnestness of the time that he spent in World War II and before he joined the military. So we have an idea of why he says the world can be different and the world should be better. So no, I do not think that this signals the end of the MCU or the end of the quality of the MCU. I think in some way or another, Marvel is going to use this as a stepping stone and provide us with something greater along the lines. And I do think the Eternals will return in a much greater capacity than we have seen them so far.
What other problems did you perceive with the Eternals? One of the major criticisms of the Eternals was that it perhaps should have been issued as a television series, with multiple episodes in such a way to better introduce the massive team of superhero individuals. What is your take on this?
I agree that the Eternals would have worked better as a Disney Plus feature where we would get a more introspective look at who the characters are, because now it was more along the lines of you're being told, and it was this heavy exposition dump in most of the film, who is who, what are their favorite things, these tons of flashbacks that felt like really a waste of nice set pieces, but set pieces we only saw for a few minutes. You're like, somebody went through effort to build that set piece. We had to get everybody in costume and film them for a few minutes of a flashback. These are things that could have been told in much lengthier stories if it was a Disney Plus show. So I don't know why they chose to make it a feature film with this many characters, but a TV show would have worked much better.
Now, concerning the, shall we say, villains of the film, the so called Deviants, there has been much discussion as to whether they are truly villains, since they have been programmed to act in a certain way, and chose to evolve along those lines. What was your takeaway from the Deviants in the film?
I think the deviants in the film are probably the most insulting part about the movie.
Really? Why is this?
Well, you see, in the comics, the deviants are mutates. They have what we consider monstrous features. I say what we consider monstrous features because just because somebody or something looks a certain way doesn't necessarily mean they're evil. And the depth of the deviants was taken away. In the comic books, as I said, they have what we consider monster features. They might have large heads, elongated faces, huge arms, tentacles or arms, different skin tones. And they are shown not to be the monsters that they're made out to be because of how they look. One of the best examples of this is a deviant called Carcass. He is this hulking red figure with, claws and giant teeth. And he is the most eloquent and peaceful character amongst the deviants. He even has a better temperament than some Eternals. I'm looking at you, Icarus. And then there is a deviant called the Reject. Now, he's called the Reject because of his mutation. He looks like a normal human being, but that's considered ugly amongst deviants because he doesn't look like what they do look like. So he is barbaric. He acts like an animal. All he knows is fighting. It's the way he was raised. He's been fighting for his life in tournaments ever since he was a child, because the deviant leadership often holds to the death tournaments for their entertainment. And this is the contradiction. Like, you look at Carcass and you expect him to be the animal. You look at Reject and you expect him to be the elegant, refined human being, because he's not like the others of his kind. He's a credit to his species, as was once said. So this really illustrates what Stanley and especially Jack Kirby was going for with the story, that don't judge a book by its cover. And that's completely lost in the film. That's completely thrown out the window, because what do we get? The deviants, they look like monsters, feral beasts, and they are monsters and feral beasts. And then you have this one deviant, Crow, who gains a level of sentience and sapience when he absorbs the Eternal's powers, which is also something that I disagreed with. You're saying that he can't be a civil being without having absorbed the knowledge and abilities of the Eternals. And then he just gets killed off.
Yes, by Athena, I believe it was.
Yes, he gets killed off by Athena. And in the comic books, Athena actually has a relationship with Crow because she sympathizes with the deviants. She disagrees that they should be destroyed simply because of their genetics. So again, for me, the one thing that I will say is insulting about this movie is the way that deviants were treated as just mindless beasts. They deserve much better than this. A lot of work has been put into the comics by Jack Kirby to really emphasize this. Do not judge someone based on what they look like. And within seconds, the film just throws that out of the window and establishes them as exactly what we fear them to be. And that one little attempt at redemption with Crow is utterly destroyed when he gets killed in the same film. The Deviants, and especially Crow, deserve much better than that.
The film seems to have mishandled this conceptual issue. It's very interesting that you say that in the comic books it's handled much differently. Hopefully we might see some sort of subspecies of the deviants if they were to return to film. Much has also been made over the question of the Celestials. Now, I would like to ask you about this. It has been said in the film that for the universe's life to be maintained, the celestial must be born of the destruction of a populated world. This includes the planet Earth. It also sheds light on the fact that, in the grand scheme of things, we are not such a rarity, and we are not so special after all. How did you feel about the conflict faced in this film to the point where, should billions survive, the Earth must be destroyed?
Well, obviously, I'm a bit biased because I live on the planet Earth.
As do I.
So the destruction of the Earth, I would not easily jump on board with that, but I do understand Kingo's point of view. I mean, Icarus is basically just, being a soldier, doing what he was told to do, what he was ordered to do. Kingo presents an interesting, a more nuanced opinion by saying, listen, we're sacrificing the future of billions of potential lives because we happen to like a few people on this planet. Is it really our place to say that? Is it really our place to decide the fate of billions who are to come and the rest of the universe? And my argument is I fully understand because we have been shown in the film that the Eternals have been tasked with doing this multiple times on multiple planets. That means that if at some point before they were tasked with populating and defending the Earth, had they taken that same stance and decided, you know what, we're not going to follow Arishem's rules anymore, we're not going to let the planet be destroyed so that life can exist further simply because we like this planet, that would mean that the Earth and the people on it would not exist.
Interesting.
Yes, that would mean that we don't exist. So, by that very definition, if you're saying you love these people and you want them to survive, you want them to stay alive, by that very definition, you're saying that we would have allowed them to not exist had we taken this stance before. So, it really presents a dilemma of objectively, yes, to save billions upon billions upon billions, or maybe even trillions. Would it be okay to sacrifice 7 billion lives? It would be efficient, but it wouldn't make it any less harder to do. So I understand both sides. I think the film might have been a bit more successful had it focused on that.
Somewhat of an intelligent superhero film debate.
Yeah, give us a debate. Give us some stakes. It doesn't always have to be huge CGI fight at the end because I'm afraid that if that's all you give people, they're going to expect that every time. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm in the minority, but I actually like the 2003 Hulk. That was a bit more philosophical. It wasn't that heavy on the action. Yes, it did end in a big CGI fight. But I like the fact that they explored the philosophical part of it more, not just, Hulk smash. The Incredible Hulk, which came after, was pretty much the exact opposite. It was more style than substance. It was a lot of action, and people preferred that one. But I'm a huge fan of the 2003 Hulk.
Where do you see the Eternals in the grand scheme of the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Well, there have been issues in the comics where the Eternals have come into conflict with heroes because they're not only programmed to progress life on the planet, but also to protect Celestials at any costs. Arishem has been said to judge the planet based on the memories of the Eternals. So, should he come back or task Celestials to come back and destroy the planet, or task the Eternals to destroy the planet, they're going to get into conflict with the Avengers or whichever super team is going to pick up the slack because we don't have that many Avengers left. It's not even sure if the Avengers are disbanded or not. So I do think that the Eternals will definitely return. There is one thing in the comics, I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, but more or less guarantees the return of all the Eternals. Won't say much more than that. But they're definitely going to come back, and I believe that they're going to come back much better than they were before.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it here. Desmond Kirk explaining to us the Eternals. It is one of the lowest rated films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe entries. However, they might just return with a whammy in the same fashion of The Winter Soldier and other such entries. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye and good fortune.